I'm Doug Hocking. I'm an historian. I've got a background in social anthropology, 5 years of graduate study, and historical archaeology, which gives me some interesting perspectives on things. I began researching Texas John Slaughter. Now, y'all remember Texas John Slaughter, right? Texas John Slaughter made them do like they oughter, 'cause if they didn't, they died. His rolled up white Stetson and pearl handle. Yeah. The only one who ever called him Texas John was Walt Disney. And Walt Disney waited until long after he was sure John was dead. And then he had him played by a 6'5" actor, which was interesting considering that Texas John was 5'4". Anyway, I was researching him to do a biography, and I started running into stories of some of the people that he chased after, and a bad man. And I said, it'd be kind of interesting. There's a lot of people that like to read about bad outlaws. And so I looked into all the train robberies along the southern corridor, that is the Gadsden Purchase, between Yuma and El Paso. And I found out that almost all of them came back to Cochise County, where I live. It's amazing. 9 of them took place here, and for the rest of them, either it was our outlaws, our lawmen, or our lawmen were the outlaws, which gets interesting. I mean, one of the most perfect robberies was pulled off by Burt Alvord and Billy Stiles. Burt was hired as the Constable of Willcox, which, despite legends, was probably the wildest town in Cochise County. Not Tombstone, but Willcox. And they hired Alvord to clean up this cow town that was full of the rejects from Texas that had come up here, which is one of the reasons we had so many train robberies in the area. They come up from Texas with a herd of cattle to feed the mines and the Indian reservations in the army. And they get here and they get paid off, and they'd spend their money on wine, women, song, gambling, and totally waste the rest. And now have no means to go back to Texas, even if they could. They were wanted there or unwanted, depending on how you look at it. So they'd stay here and do what they knew. They'd herd other people's cattle, this time without permission. And when that became less profitable, they went after stagecoaches. Something folks forget is this area had 3 of the biggest towns between St. Louis and San Francisco: Silver City, Bisbee, and Tombstone, which were all pumping out gold and silver. So there was money on the move. And when cattle became less profitable, they started robbing stagecoaches. And then when the train came along, let's go after that payroll. So this became robbery central. Anyway, back to Burt and Stiles. Burt gets hired as constable, promptly kills, murders 2 people. One of them was a guy that locked him in a basement as a joke. As soon as he got out, he found the guy and killed him. And the other was a Mexican who started bad-mouthing the United States. That was grounds for murder. And so Burt gets together with his buddies, and they go in the back room of a saloon to play cards and drink all night. Stiles and Matt Burtz go out the window, mount their horses, ride to Cochise. And over at Cochise, they hit the train at 11 o'clock at night as it pulls into the station. The doors open on the express car to throw out the mail sacks, and the boys are on them. It's so quiet, they don't even wake the passengers until they blow the safe. And then they ride back to Willcox in through the window, and we've been playing cards all night. Next day, Billy joins the posse to go in search of himself. How many young boys have done that? Eventually, Wells Fargo detective Thacker says, I always knew it was Billy. I just didn't have the proof. Yeah, right. Perfect crime has been pulled off for 4 months. And then they decided to go do it again because Billy didn't get enough the first time. And they pulled off a robbery at Fairbank, and they try to do it the same way they've done, but now they pull it at dusk. And the whole town of Fairbank goes out to greet the train. There's nothing else to do in Fairbank. And so they've got a crowd, and Three-Fingered Jack gets shot, and he can't keep up with the boys as they ride away. And when the sheriff catches up with him, he rats out the whole gang. And the Sheriff Wyatt says, Stiles and Alvord? Those idiots? They planned this? In any event, they get rounded up, and Stiles immediately goes state's evidence and gets released on his own recognizance. And he joins up with Thacker, who knows he was always guilty. Thacker, who gives him a gun, and they now go after Matt Burt's. And on the way back, it becomes clear that Matt Burt's is going to go state's evidence too. So while Matt and Thacker go into the restaurant in Tombstone to talk over his plea agreement, Billy takes the gun Thacker just gave him and breaks everybody out of jail. After 3 months, he decides he doesn't like being on the run, so he turns himself in as state's evidence again, back and forth. Eventually, he ends up hiding in Mexico and gets hired as an Arizona Ranger. Spends a year on the payroll doing nothing. And finally, Burt Mossman says, look, I hired you to get Chacon, most wanted man in Arizona, except that he's in Mexico hiding. You remember who called the rat from the Clint Eastwood movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? You remember the list of crimes they read off as they were getting ready to hang him? That's Chacon. He got accused of everything. So Billy, Texas Ranger, goes and finds his buddy Alvord, also on the run in Mexico. And they get together and say, hey, we'll talk Chacon into coming up on the U.S. side of the border where we can arrest him. And we'll split the reward. And Alvord says, but what about the reward on me? Yeah, we'll split that one too. Unbelievable. All these stories come back to Cochise County. The first train robbery pulled off by a guy named Kit Carson Joy and his buddies. Eventually, they're all rounded up in jail. They break jail. And on the way out of town, they kill the guy, the member of the gang who ratted them out. 2 of them get caught, and Joy rides away with the sheriff after him. The sheriff can't catch up with him and has to come back and tell the rest of the posse, no Joy. But he comes back to find out that the other 2 fellows that they'd rounded up had met with an accident involving a length of rope and an oak tree. Joy is on the loose, and Rackety Smith spots him coming into the ranch to steal food. Everybody's afraid of the guy. Rackety gets a high-powered rifle and shoots him at long range, blowing off his leg below the knee. Now, Kit Carson Joy is the only one to go to trial. And he's convicted and sent to prison. In prison, he has to take up a new line of work. Robbing trains and punching cows ain't going to work with one leg. So in prison, he learns to be a tailor. Released from prison in New Mexico, Kit Carson Joy comes to Fort Huachuca in Cochise County to become the post tailor. I told you all these stories come back to Cochise County, one way or the other. Looking into these, I found the newspapers really helpful and was able to trace stories. And it's just amazing the things that happened. I mean, the posse goes after a man with all the paperwork, and they follow him to his hometown and arrest him. And the local sheriff promptly arrests the posse for kidnapping. One I love, John Slaughter. The robbery is pulled off in the San Simon. And the train, the boys depart on foot. The train goes on to Tucson, where the local sheriff, the Pima County sheriff, realizes they haven't got any horses. John Slaughter doesn't know about the robbery yet. He has a train. Slaughter doesn't. He can go back to San Simon on the train and round up these guys on foot. So they load horses. No ammunition. There should be no ammunition. No food, no bedding, no paperwork. They load in the train, they get to the San Simon and follow the tracks. Only to discover that the boys did have horses hidden, and they've headed for Mexico. So the posse heads to Mexico. At the border, half of them quit because they're cold and hungry. Over the border, they get down near Janos, and the sheriff says, we probably ought to let the Mexicans know we're here. And they let the Mexican authorities know, and they promptly get arrested for illegally importing horses and guns. And they get thrown in the dungeon, and they're stuck there for a couple months and becoming a major international incident, a major diplomatic problem. There's some wonderful stories in this book. Just after a while, I started writing tongue-in-cheek. Halfway through the research, I realized this is just, entirely too funny. You can hardly believe that some of these things went on. And it's a good train story. Everybody loves a train story, right? Everybody loves Outlaws. So now we've got both.